Of course, this time around, it's not the Rose Bowl, it's the Cotton Bowl. The Ohio State Buckeyes facing off with USC, a couple teams that just missed the college football playoff. We're joined by Steve Hellwagon. You can join him on bucknuts.com, also doing work for 24/7 Sports. Steve, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Mark. What's going on?
Not too much. I can't wait for these huge matchups, and not just the college football playoffs, but the rest of them. And this is front and center for me, along with a couple other matchups. So before we get started on Cotton Bowl prep, your thoughts about the college football playoff, maybe taking some attention away from the other bowl games. We've got some huge matchups, including this one front and center. The Big Ten championship maybe be tarnished to a certain extent because of the lack of entry into a playoff. Do you think the playoff has hurt as much as it's helped?
Well, you know, we went through the BCS cycle from 98 up and through 2013, whatever that was, 12 years or 15 years, whatever that was. And it was always just two teams that made it. And there were a lot of times people thought, man, that team that finished third or that team that finished fourth. There was one time they had three unbeaten major conference teams, and I think Auburn was the one that got left out. So everyone knows that what's better than two is to go to four. And now they've gone to four. This is the fourth year of this format. And of course, Ohio State was in it the first year and won it. They were not in it the second year. They had a great team, basically the same team coming back, and didn't make it to the Final Four, lost the home game to Michigan State. Last year, they lose to Penn State, who wins the Big Ten, and Ohio State gets in and gets blown out by Clemson. So I think you had three teams this year that were locks. When you talk about Georgia, Clemson, Oklahoma, there was no question that those three, had they won their conference championship games, was going to be in it. It comes down to then Alabama or Ohio State. I think if you looked at it on paper, the resumes were almost identical. I mean, Ohio State had 3 wins against teams ranked better than anybody Alabama defeated in the course of the season. But Ohio State had that 31-point loss at Iowa, and that ultimately seems to be what kept them out of this. I made the comment before the Big Ten championship game that Ohio State didn't need to beat them 59-0 as they did 3 years ago to jump over Baylor and TCU and into the playoff, but they couldn't go out and win the game 17-14 with 3 turnovers, and ultimately that's kind of how it played out. They turned the ball over several times and kept Wisconsin in the game, and it was a decisive win. They were the better team on the field. They just didn't look like a dominant team on the field, and that kind of opened the door, I think, for Alabama. And of course, Nick Saban, he started posturing right away. If we lost by 31 points, you wouldn't hear a peep out of us. So that's what it is. I'm forgetting the best 4 teams in there. I think you could have made a case either way in this instance. And in this instance, it's too bad it's not an 8-team playoff because, quite honestly, Wisconsin, you know, even Auburn with 3 losses, 2 of them over 2 of the top 4 teams, 2 wins over the top 4 teams, deserves, you know, maybe a shot with 3 losses. I mean, there's so many teams out there that you could make a case for, but long and short of it, I look at it that, you know, the Pac-12 in particular has really been shaded under this format. They got Oregon in the first year and Washington in the third year, and that's been about it for them. So I don't know. I don't think any one league can say anything one way or the other than, I mean, the Big Ten had a 12-win team, an 11-win team, and a 10-win team and didn't get anybody in. I mean, here's Penn State 10-2, 2 losses by 4 points. I mean, that's just, you know, a crazy scenario for them, kind of like what Michigan had last year, and they don't get in either. So I don't know what to say other than, you know, you play out the season, and I'm not eager for it to go to 8 teams anytime soon. But again, I guess the moral of this story is don't lose by 31 points to a team that only wins 7 games.
It was by far the most magnified football game of the season. Anybody who roughly follows college football had that score ingrained into their head by the end of the process and the selection. Everybody knew Ohio State got blown out by Iowa, and a lot of other commentators couldn't really go to any other games, but that seemed to be the one that magnified more than any other game. And to your point, the Big 12, 2 out of 4, the Pac-12, 2 out of 4 in these 4 playoff years, and the SEC, just 4 years into it now, already has 5 teams out of the 4 years and 5-2 against the Pac-12 and the Big 12. So we already have a great disparity just 4 years into this. I won't go on my rant about the way I think the playoff team should have been selected. My viewers have told me a number of times that they've heard me rant enough about it already. So we'll move on to the Cotton Bowl and Ohio State's motivation for USC. That gets questioned every time a team that has huge aspirations falls a little bit short and gets slotted down. In this case, Urban Meyer has a good track record, most notably and most recently, the team that you just mentioned, the ultra-talented 2015 team that was able to get off the mat and dust off Michigan and dominate Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. So do you have any concerns about Ohio State following in that path?
Well, I think it cuts both ways. You go back to 2013, they lost to Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, and then went and played Taj Boyd and Clemson down in the Orange Bowl and didn't play particularly well. Their defense gave up 41 points in that game, and they get beat. I think it kind of cuts both ways. But my feeling is that this Ohio State team does want to end on a high note. They had several of the players graduated this past weekend in the commencement exercises for fall semester, and they put out a stat. This is a crazy statistic. Of the 22 players who are going to start or figure to start for Ohio State in this game against USC, 11 of them have their degrees. So, they've done everything that they were supposed to do off the field. They've been part of one of the great 4-year runs in Ohio State history with 2 Big Ten championships and the national championship. And I think that they want to go out on a high note. It is a top-notch opponent with USC, the Pac-12 champion, easily the best team in the Pac-12 this year, no question about it. And I think that Buckeye fans are eager to see how the Buckeyes match up against a great Pac-12 opponent. And at the same time, I think the players and the coaches obviously want to end this season on a high note, get to 12 wins, and start the build, the reload, I would say, probably for what could be a great year in 2018.